We're kicking off the talks with an intro, sort of Buffers 101, by Lydia Brinkley from the Upper Susquehanna Coalition. So Lydia is a tireless advocate and bootstrapping in the field riparian buffer coordinator for the Upper Susquehanna Coalition. She uses her master's degree from SUNY ESF in Forestry and Natural Resources Management and extensive experience to lead a diverse program throughout 22 county area. As the coordinator, Lydia and her team provide assistance to landowners and conservation districts in the form of technical and programmatic assistance, landscape assessment, site plans, planting strategy, tree planting help, capacity building, and funding opportunities. All around a very knowledgeable buffer person. So without further ado, Lydia.
Front and back and the pointer if you need it.
Thank you. I have never seen such a crowd for riparian buffer stuff. Usually it's like pulling teeth and you guys paid to be here. So like I'm shocked and thank you for coming out. So I'm Lydia Brinkley with the Upper Susquehanna Coalition. I'd like to just tell you real quickly about the Upper Susquehanna Coalition to kind of put into context who I am and why I'm here. So the Upper Susquehanna Coalition is a coalition of soil and water conservation districts, 22 of us in total, 18 in New York and 4 in Pennsylvania. Collectively, we make up the headwaters to the Chesapeake Bay. And we work on basically everything that your typical soil and water conservation district would work on, further promoting soft practices such as grazing, riparian buffers, wetland development, and the like. Oh, and there it is. So we really promote habitat, water storage capacity, stream bank protection, nutrient reduction in our waterways. And really all of this comes from, all of these initiatives come from the TMDL, or total maximum daily load allocation, that's placed on the Chesapeake Bay currently. That's ultimately where my position came out of. We have all of these nutrients going into the bay. This is the land use that contributes to those nutrients, most particularly nitrogen and phosphorus, as you see here. That green looks like it doesn't fit, but I'm pretty sure it's row crops. So most of the nitrogen and phosphorus comes from row crops, but we also have some other nice big pieces of the pie there that I love addressing, such as pasture, barnyards, hayland, and the like. So that's where it comes from on agricultural land. And you really don't have to interpret this graph too much. The only thing I really want you to get out of it is why riparian buffers are so important. And you see them, maybe I have a pointer. Yep, okay, right here. So we have forest buffers and grass buffers, and over on this axis here, we have nutrient sediment removal efficiency. And all you really have to do is say, look at those bars, they're so high. Grass buffers with fencing are also very high. So the high bars mean that, wow, grass buffers and forest buffers on agricultural land are really good at removing nutrients from water runoff, stormwater runoff, groundwater before they enter your streams. Yeah, everybody on the same page? Okay, good. Okay, and further, just to show, we have a wetland team with the Upper Susquehanna Coalition. We promote wetlands, we promote grass buffers, but really at the end of the day, out of all of those very wonderful practices, we're getting the biggest bang for our buck with a forested buffer. Trees, shrubs. So what is a riparian forest buffer, or a riparian buffer in general? I like to describe it as an ecotone, or a transition zone between two different types of environments. In this case, we're talking about a terrestrial environment and an aquatic environment. This illustration is most commonly what I think of when I talk about a riparian buffer, right? We have agricultural land use, pasture here, row crop here, and it's the buffer in between the stream and this land use is doing essentially that. It's buffering the water that's coming off of that land for nutrients, sediments, probably also picks up trash or anything else that's flowing in the stormwater off of that land. That is most often what this environment is described as. More basically, we describe it as it's an area that keeps stuff out of the stream. And that stuff, like I said, literally could be trash. It's It's nutrient and sediment in my world, but a lot of stuff is kept out with trees and shrubs. And it improves the stream's ability to process any stuff that makes it into the stream. Any of the stuff that makes it into the stream may be further processed in that stream, and I refer to that as attenuation and assimilation of those nutrients. Buffers also lead to bank stability, and they're a huge habitat component for both aquatic and terrestrial species. They also regulate temperature, which all leads to better water quality. A little bit about the transport of nutrients in water runoff. So our phosphorus, which nitrogen and phosphorus, huge focuses for us, huge focuses when we talk about water quality in general, whether you're talking about harmful algal blooms or the Chesapeake Bay. It really doesn't matter. We're talking about nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment. Here we have this depiction showing that phosphorus generally reaches our surface waters by overland flow. Nitrogen reaches our surface waters through both overland flow and also groundwater discharge. So in the following slides, I'm going to kind of go over how a riparian forest buffer would treat both of those situations. I'm just going to flip right through there. Okay, and one last word about stream energy. We have to talk about the biology in the stream and how the biology in the stream contributes to further attenuation and assimilation of nutrients if a forested buffer is present. These organisms right here are diatoms, and they are, the basis for our food web in an aquatic environment. Algae, other larger organisms will go on to consume the diatoms, and then what consumes that is these aquatic insects that I've shown you here. Maybe people have heard of EPT, Ephemeroptera, Plecoptera, Trichoptera, mayflies, stoneflies, caddisflies. Those are indicators of good water quality. They all go back to the base of the food web, which is a diatom. These diatoms need a shady environment to thrive. They are the preferred food for scrapers. A lot of scrapers are your mayflies and your caddisflies, and they actually are a small percent of the food energy in the stream total. So a lot of people ask me, well, how big does the buffer have to actually be to provide these services? And my answer is, it depends, right? It depends on your site conditions. It depends on the landowner goals. It depends on the land use. It depends on the stream channel, the stream morphology, the space that you have available, right? So you can talk in program language, and you can talk in the federal government language, and they say that you need a 35-foot buffer to adequately address the adjacent land use nutrient load. That's a politically driven number, okay? I'm sure it has some value, but mostly it's politically driven. So I like to go by the science, and basically when I'm talking to folks, they're looking for a bank stabilization, or we're looking to get their cattle out of the stream, and so we're looking for maybe some nitrogen and sediment removal. So, I mean, geez, I like 100-foot buffers. They really do quite a bit. Like I said, it does depend. If you can get a 10-foot buffer, get it, right? Instead of no buffer. But the bigger buffer you get, the better it's going to be. And then you can go on to talk about all the critters that benefit from bigger and bigger buffers. Would you like to see eagles? Would you like to see ospreys, landowner? What types of habitat would you like to see on your property? Then the buffer gets bigger and bigger. To talk quickly about the sediment and what is required for sediment removal from a buffer. It's really nice to have a forested buffer. They do great for sediment removal. It's even better when it's accompanied with a grass buffer. Even if it's a 10-foot buffer before the runoff reaches the forest, it's nice to have grass. It really slows that water down. The sediments drop out pretty quickly. For anybody who maybe knows soils in here, I'll ask a nice question. So basically, let's see, within the first 33 feet, we're getting 64% of the sediments dropping out. Oh, well, I have the answer right there. So my question was going to be, so what's dropping out if we get a bigger buffer, all the components of your soil. So your silt and clay are actually dropping out with the larger buffer. It's harder to get the silts and the clays out. Sometimes they're charged particles. And the silts and clays may do the most damage to an aquatic environment by filling in those spaces in between rocks and basically taking out the habitat for all those aquatic organisms that will in turn assimilate the nutrients that are entering the waterways. So by not having the forested buffer, you're letting more enter and you're decreasing the ability of the stream to actually take up any nutrients and process them. So just some nice facts here. Over 90% of the nitrogen can be removed within 20 meters, given a nice, floodplain type of area and floodplain type of situation. I really like to show this illustration showing the difference between a forested area and a grassed area. So wider streams are typically present in forested areas. Narrower streams are typically present in grassed areas. Grass keeps encroaching on the stream, making the stream narrower and narrower. Where do you think more nutrient assimilation in stream takes place? In a wider stream or a narrower stream? Wider stream, right. So forested streams are way more likely than grassy streams to provide more ecological services, such as cleaning water, decomposition of waste, flood retention, and temperature regulation. It's really easy to see. The wider the buffer, the more area available for critters to live, the more nutrient processing that can occur. Riparian forest buffers also reduce channel erosion. They reduce meandering and basically stabilize banks. And maybe you guys see this a lot. I don't know, I sure do. And it's typically accompanied by a cropland situation or, that's the environment that I often live in, right? Agriculture. So that's what I'm seeing is this is adjacent to cropland. Maybe you guys see it adjacent to highways. Maybe some other types of roads, I'm not quite sure. But, vegetation can do a lot for banks like this. At this point, we're gonna have to do more than plant a few trees on this bank, but it probably could have helped in the long run with reducing bank erosion. So the physical habitat, just want to talk about, comparing agricultural sites versus forested sites and what you see in terms of habitat. And basically, when you look at it, what's the difference? So in agricultural streams, you typically see more fine substrates. Sand, silt, and clay are the bed of that stream more often. There's low, large woody debris, right? Less large woody debris, less habitat. Fish like to hang out in overhang, with overhang, wood, stuff like that. This basically means to me, when I see a stream like this, that there's an unstable flow regime. High peak flows, unsuitable habitat for aquatic organisms, and then therefore fish. And a low canopy cover basically leads to a decrease in dissolved oxygen. Higher temperatures, less oxygen available in the water for organisms to thrive. This is some research that I did on the Skaneateles Lake watershed comparing forested and agriculturally dominated subwatersheds. These values here are all statistically significant. So large woody debris, when we compare a forest and agricultural situation, are much different. Much more large woody debris in a forested setting. Duh, right? I mean, yeah. Canopy cover, obviously much higher in a forested area than an agricultural setting. But I don't want you to think, oh, well, a stream in an agricultural setting is just a bare stream. That's often not the case. When I come in up to a stream area in an agricultural setting, there's typically honeysuckle or buckthorn or other invasive non-native species that are lining maybe one or two rows of that stream. So there is vegetation present. It just may not be ideal vegetation. Wetted width of thaleweg, this is basically just the width and depth. Forested streams are much wider and shallower than agricultural streams, and dissolved oxygen content is much higher than forested streams. So this is research that I did to basically validate science that already exists, right? We can keep doing this type of research over and over, comparing agricultural and forest-dominated watersheds, and we'll find basically the same results. So what you're not seeing in there, anybody know what these are? No one ever knows that. Nobody. That's awesome. So black fly larvae are, yeah, smart people here today. Pretty cool creatures, right? They have little hooks at the base of their body, I guess. They hook onto anything that may be on the rocks, maybe the rocks themselves, and they actually have these fans that hang out. They're not so grotesque when they're in the water, right? Because they're not sucking your blood, but they have labral fans, and they just kind of sway in the water, and they filter a lot of detritus out of the water. So they might be kind of good, They might be kind of good while they're in the water, but then they hatch and they become biting flies. There's some caddisflies, indicators of good water quality. Another caddisfly. That's a stonefly, and you can see why stoneflies are really great creatures and indicators of water quality. There are their gills at the bottom of their body, and they are really susceptible to, nutrients, pollution, sediments rolling down and hitting their little gills. Mayflies, same type of deal. Their gills are all located on, their abdomen. Very vulnerable to pollution. That's an alien, but you wouldn't know. So through my research, I found that the good flies, mayflies, stoneflies, caddisflies, are much more prevalent in a forested system than an agricultural system. Diptera, we'll just, for, ease of this talk, let's just call them biting flies. Biting flies are much more prevalent in an agricultural setting. Number of taxa present. I always find this startling. Number of different types of bugs, right? Much more diversity in a forested system. And then dominant taxa proportion. So agricultural settings are pretty much dominated by 80% is one type of organism in that water, and it's probably a biting fly. Ooh. So that's a little bit about the biology and what you will find in the water, comparing the physical environment and the biological environment. So now we'll just go right into what are we looking for? So where can I put a buffer? I know why it's important. Where does it go? Some easy sites to get at. This farmer is not currently farming this land. Where my friend is standing, that's 35 feet. So, we got about 20 feet of land here to work with to establish some type of forest cover. Easy, right? We don't have to take any land out of production. This is an easy get. This is also easy. There's already fence. The landowner initially didn't want trees. No, too prohibitive. I don't want trees. Well, now that we excluded his cattle from the area and we set up watering systems, he doesn't really care what happens here anymore. So we went in there a year after we put the fence up and were able to get a forested area. These are a little bit tougher, areas with a lot of invasive species. We can still get them. We can still establish native forest cover there. Fields of goldenrod adjacent to streams. A lot of people think that an old ag field can just be left. It'll turn into trees. Don't worry. That's false. These lands chemicals have been sprayed on them. There is no seed bank. And then if goldenrod comes in, nothing is going to grow, nothing is going to compete with the goldenrod. You have to compete with the goldenrod, and you will be the only one to succeed, not a little seed. A lot of people don't think that, little streams are really going to make a big difference. I like to say we need to buffer absolutely everything, especially the small streams, because they are the majority of what's out there. They're often disregarded, and they basically, you got to start them off right, just like your kids, right? You start them off right from the beginning, and they're going to grow into beautiful people. So that's what you want to do with your streams. You want to treat them right initially so they can go on, and it will never be the problem starting from your first order stream. At least set the water up to succeed. And here in this illustration, we see that small streams are basically almost 50% of the total stream miles in the United States. And that's my last slide here. I just kind of want to leave you with some benefits, talking points. There's a really great website that I often reference called cowandfish.com. It's a website and an organization out of Alberta, Canada. And they develop like all of these manuals, but this is really easy to talk to landowners about when you have an illustration like this and when you have, very simple language. But at the end of the day, it comes down to, if you have a riparian forest buffer, you are promoting the health of clean water and the health of your water supply and the public by implementing this practice. And this also leads to, a healthy economy. You're not spending money on water quality and basically cleaning your water after somebody has messed it up. Many somebodies. And that's all I have for this. And am I perfect with time? Perfect, yeah.